Staff Sergeant Phoebe Hartley stood quietly near the edge of the command tent, her rifle case balanced against her boot as she listened in silence. Lieutenant Cole Mercer went over the final mission brief with the smooth, precise rhythm of a man who'd done this 100 times. His finger traced a route on the digital map before landing on a small marker high on the ridge. He told her that was where she'd stay. Keep watch over the valley, maintain comms, and report if anything went wrong. His voice stayed courteous, but the meaning beneath it was sharp. She wasn't part of the main fight. Mercer didn't glance her way when he called the SEALs up for their final gear check. Neither did Chief Darius Holt, who half smirked and muttered something under his breath about paper targets. No one asked for her range card. No one cared about her sector layout. No one even bothered to check if she'd confirmed her line of sight across the ridge. They just nodded absently as she stepped out, as if that was exactly where she belonged. Out of the way. She didn't argue. There was nothing worth saying. She'd seen this before and knew the routine by heart. To them, she wasn't one of their own. Not with that guard patch stitched onto her shoulder. Outside, the air bit cold and thin. The mission was set for 600, but the morning light had already begun to shift by the time she reached the ledge she'd scouted the day before. 700 meters of steep rock now separated her from the team weaving through the forested valley below. She double-checked her optics, then did it again. Wind from the west, steady at 3.2 meters per second. Her rifle rested neatly across her knees, gleaming faintly in the pale dawn. Pulling the loop of her ghillie hood over her braid, Phoebe watched the trees sway. Nobody had thanked her for making the climb. Nobody had asked how long it would take her to pull out if things went bad. That didn't bother her. She didn't need small talk. Only a clean line, a stable perch, and a little quiet to think. She settled into the cold rocks, breathing out, slow, steady. Below, the figures faded into shadow, not one of them looking back. That was fine. They'd remember where she was soon enough. Phoebe Hartley grew up in Ridgefield, Colorado, a mountain town where snow overstayed its welcome, and the air always smelled of pine and cold metal. Her grandfather, a veteran of Iron Valley Ridge, had put a rifle in her hands before she could see over the fence post. He owned a rusted old spotting scope, a deep scar slicing across his chin, and a voice that barely ever rose above a whisper. Her father had once worn captain's bars in the Army. He came home from Fallujah with shrapnel lodged in his back and a right arm that refused to obey him, yet he still steadied her aim by matching her breath with his own. Every Saturday morning, while other kids sat in front of cartoons, Phoebe was out in the yard, lining up tin cans at 80 yards with a .22 and no scope. When she missed, her father made her explain why. Wind, sight picture, trigger control. By 14, she could punch a hole through a milk jug at 300 meters, using nothing but iron sights. In crosswind. From the prone. Her father used to say she'd inherited her grandfather's patience and her mother's stubborn streak. Her hands had grown rough and calloused long before her voice carried any weight. It was at a junior regional match near Ridgefield that a recruiter from the Army Marksmanship Unit noticed her. She hadn't taken the first place, but the way she flowed between stations, steady, deliberate, unshaken, made him stop and watch. He spoke to her afterward, said she had something most shooters lacked. She just nodded, said little, and shook his hand. At 18, she enlisted and shipped off to Camp Wainwright. She trained like someone trying to silence every doubt she'd ever heard. Without saying a word, she became the youngest distinguished riflewoman in her battalion, and the only woman in her sniper school class. 43 entered. 28 made it out. She ranked among the top 5. There were no speeches, no handshakes, no applause, just another quiet move to the next assignment. For 3 years, she competed across the world. Long-range precision, moving targets, unpredictable wins. She earned medals, but they never meant as much as the lesson her father had drilled into her. Shooting without purpose is just expensive noise. Those words stayed in her head every time she pulled the trigger. When the Army tried to keep her stateside as a competitor, she pushed back harder, applying for every combat posting available. She was rejected again and again, until one day the orders came through. Ranger School. The men there didn't know what to make of her, but she hadn't shown up to be liked. She came to pass. She came to pass, and she did. Then came Afghanistan. Phoebe hadn't gone there to prove a point or make a name for herself. She went because it mattered, because somewhere out there might be a target that only she could take. The briefing room was small and airless, lit by 2 flickering fluorescent panels that hummed above the table. It was 7:15 a.m. Staff Sergeant Phoebe Hartley sat quietly in the corner, boots laced tight, her notepad resting on one knee. At the front, Lieutenant Cole Mercer stood with sleeves rolled up and jaw locked, walking the team through the mission. His tone was sharp, clipped, and confident. He covered ingress routes, movement intervals, fallback positions, each point flowing like a checklist he'd rehearsed 100 times. When he finally reached her assignment, his words stalled. "Hartley will take Overwatch from this ridge," he said, tapping the digital map with his stylus. "She'll handle comms, relay updates, and stay one click clear of direct engagement." His eyes didn't pause on her, and his tone left no room for questions. A polite dismissal, polished, rehearsed, and absolute. Chief Petty Officer Darius Holt didn't bother hiding his smirk. From the back, he muttered something about National Guard shooters being good for paper targets and not much else. A few chuckles followed. No one looked her way. No one asked for her sector diagram or her range card. Captain Ethan Rowe, her battalion's operations officer, simply cleared his throat and moved the briefing forward. She expected as much. It was nothing new. Phoebe didn't react. She closed her notepad, slid it into her vest, and quietly started building a mental list. Holt's mags were taped wrong for quick reloads. Santos's radio antenna was sticking high enough to give away a silhouette. Their movement spacing was too tight for the terrain ahead. 2 choke points stood out on their route, perfect ambush zones. No one had asked her opinion, so she didn't give it. She just marked every blind spot, every range line in her mind. Her father's voice echoed back, calm and steady. Pride deafens men. Assumptions bury them. When the briefing wrapped, the SEALs moved out fast, boots crunching in unison. Phoebe lingered behind on purpose, staying clear of the noise. Her ascent to the Overwatch point was deliberate. 700 meters of steep, punishing climb, the same path she'd scouted 2 days before. By 8:30 a.m., she lay prone in a bed of rocks and low brush, her M2010 resting perfectly on its bipod. Wind held steady from the west. She adjusted the scope, breathed out, and locked in. Below her, the SEALs advanced through the trees. Tight formation, single line, predictable. She said nothing, just watched. She watched in silence through the loopholed Mark V HD, Phoebe Hartley tracking the team moving far below. Their formation was too close. About 5 meters between men, sometimes tighter in spots. Fine for open desert, a liability in Vandar Forest. Their silhouettes marched in a straight, predictable cadence over the uneven ground. Heads down, rifles angled outward. She swept her gaze past each one. She nudged her scope from 800 to 900 meters. Wind still steady from the west, and reminded herself she'd walked this valley 2 days earlier. She'd mapped it alone, range card in one hand, compass in the other. and flagged 2 spots as high risk. Right now, the SEALs were walking into the first. A flicker caught her eye. A flash under a second. Not sunlight, but a reflection at a wrong angle and wrong color. 20 meters up on the opposite slope, tucked in shade behind rocks and pines, something glinted. She tweaked parallax and blinked. A thin strip of reflective tape, maybe glass. Then she noticed a bush that hadn't been there on recon, taller, too still. Her chest tightened. At 08:52, the PKM opened up from the ridgeline, heavy, abrupt, about 100 rounds a minute, booming across the bowl of the valley. The first burst stitched into the trees beside the lead operator. Wood splintered, dirt flew, and voices leapt onto the net. 2 more machine guns joined from flanking slopes, molding a tight L-shaped kill zone. Phoebe's fingers moved of their own accord. Radio traffic flooded the ether, Cole Mercer yelling for suppressive fire, Darius Holt shouting grid coordinates. Someone screamed, they were pinned and then scattered. Men dove for cover behind logs and rocks that barely hid them. One rolled too far and took a leg hit, Santos. Through the static, she heard Mercer call for close air. Apache support, ETA 22 minutes out of Candor Air Base. Phoebe didn't flinch. Her hand slid to the bolt, and she dialed elevation. Wind held at 3.5 meters per second. She scanned the northern slope and watched 2 fighters scramble to set up an RPG. One crouched behind cover, while the other shouldered the launcher and adjusted his aim. Her breathing found a rhythm. Inhale, exhale, tight and steady. The world seemed to shrink around her. The first shot cracked at 740 meters, the suppressor dulling the report to a whisper. Years of training soaked up the recoil. The round punched high through the gunner's chest, just left of center, and he dropped soundlessly. Phoebe worked the bolt without pause. The second fighter lunged for the launcher. She led him by a foot and fired. The bullet caught him in the ribs as he twisted, folding him into the brush. The SEALs below had no clue where the support fire came from, only that 2 threats had vanished. Phoebe exhaled, slow and steady, then shifted her position by 4 inches, scanning again through the glass. Her next target appeared, a pair of fighters dragging a PKM toward a ridge break on the southern edge. 20 seconds, and they'd have the SEALs' rear flank. She corrected for windage, breath steadying again. 1 inhale, 1 exhale. The world narrowed to the crosshairs. The shot was already halfway there before the echo rolled through the valley. Wood cracked, dirt burst upward, voices tangled across the comms. Chaos. And in that chaos, Staff Sergeant Phoebe Hartley moved like water. Her focus never wavered behind the scope. Heat shimmer rose from the rocks beneath her. The barrel glowed faintly, but the M2010 held its aim true. She pressed her cheek to the stock, worked the bolt, and let the brass bounce off her forearm before it settled in the dust. At 600 meters, another 2-man RPG crew shifted out of concealment, the gunner kneeling, the loader unclipping the tube. They were quick and well-trained. Phoebe was quicker. She held her breath. Half-mile right for wind, 2 clicks high for elevation. Confirmed range. She squeezed the trigger. The round hit just under the collarbone, spinning the gunner backward. Before the loader could dive, she cycled again and fired. The second shot hit center mass, dropping him instantly. No hesitation. She turned the turret, wind nudging north. The PKM team she'd marked earlier was crawling to her left, trying to reach a break in the terrain that would give them a clean enfilade on the SEAL's cover. Through the scope, she watched the gunner brace the bipod as the assistant fed the belt. They hadn't seen her. 750 meters. Uphill angle, she adjusted for drop and squeezed the trigger. The round punched just under the sternum, dead center. The assistant gunner flinched and tried to flee, but she cut him down before he'd taken 5 paces. Radio traffic spiked. Cole Mercer was calling for backup. One of his men was hit. Another was running low on ammo, and panic rippled through the net. Nobody knew who was laying down the perfect fire, only that someone out there was. Phoebe reached for her handset, clicked once, paused, then clicked again. Down in the valley, Mercer fell silent, and the voice that followed carried a different tone. A low murmur of realization, half disbelief, half hope, threading through the chaos. Someone was watching over them. Phoebe returned to the scope. Her breathing never changed. 800 meters to the southeast, a man in a black vest slipped between rock outcrops, radio in his left hand, chest rig on, moving like he was directing the fight. She tracked him across 30 yards of broken ground. He stopped at a ridge break, paused to key his radio. She led him 2 feet and fired. The round hit just beneath the clavicle. He went down mid-transmission and stayed still for 3 long minutes. She dismantled the attack methodically, each shot measured, each threat prioritized by proximity, weapon type, and movement pattern. She cut down a spotter crawling toward a sniper position, then a runner carrying RPG ammo across the rear line at 400 meters. She caught a fighter pushing through a shadowed draw. He raised his rifle and then folded where he stood. Her breathing stayed even. 1 round every 4 or 5 seconds. No hurry, no wasted motion. The scope was her world. Through the glass, she watched Santos get dragged back by Darius Holt, blood dark on his sleeve. Mercer shifted left, shouting orders while returning fire. One SEAL flipped to burst and tried to hold the flank. They were hanging on, just barely. Then the world above them shifted. The Apache rotor wash built a low, rolling thunder at 0917. The first helicopter crested the ridge. Phoebe didn't flinch. She stayed on target until the chain gun spun up and the final threats melted into brush. She lowered the rifle with steady hands and listened as Nina confirmed the kills. Every shot had mattered. Rolling onto her side, she let out a long breath while the ridge fell quiet. The last cracks of gunfire faded into distant echoes, then nothing. Dust settling across the valley like a lowered curtain. The Apaches hovered a beat, blades thumping steady, then peeled south. Down below, the SEALs stayed low and scattered among rocks and trees, waiting for the all clear. From her perch above it all, Phoebe eased her cheek off the stock. The barrel still radiated warmth against her gloves. She checked the bolt. Clear. No words were necessary. She unscrewed the suppressor, slid the rifle into its case, and began breaking down her hide sight 1 careful step at a time. Brush, netting, loose stones packed with the same methodical calm she'd used through every shot. Her heart rate never spiked, not even then. That evening, back at the operations center, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Phoebe stood by the comms board, sipping lukewarm coffee and dusty fatigues. Lieutenant Cole Mercer approached slowly, helmet in hand, sleeves rolled, a new weight in his voice. He told her she'd saved them, that he'd been wrong. She nodded. A moment later, Chief Petty Officer Darius Holt came up beside him, arm in a sling. No joke this time. He reached into his pocket and held out a small black coin. No ceremony, no speech. Phoebe took it and then walked out into the night. 6 months later, the Georgia heat wrapped Camp Wainwright like a wet sheet. Staff Sergeant Phoebe Hartley stood at the firing line with a dozen soldiers arrayed beside her, some brand new, a few with combat patches, and all of them listening as she walked the row without raising her voice, checking stances, breathing patterns, and trigger discipline. When she reached the middle of the line, Phoebe repeated the same words she always gave to a new class. Shooting without purpose is just expensive noise. No one dared question her tone. They didn't have to. The story had already spread, not in reports or debriefs, but in the quiet talk passed between instructors and teams. Someone had once held a ridgeline when nobody else could. Someone without a tab or title to make people notice. Just a soldier who did the job. The Sniper Integration Pilot Program had been born from lessons written in valleys like that one. The Army wanted adaptability, precision, soldiers who could blend in and vanish again when the work was done. Phoebe was the blueprint. She never bragged, never explained, she taught. She showed how to read the land by instinct, how to feel the wind through the grass instead of trusting numbers on a screen. She taught patience and stillness, how to move only when movement mattered. Most of all, she taught them that true leadership doesn't demand attention. When the moment comes, the quiet ones already know where to stand. In the end, Staff Sergeant Phoebe Hartley never needed recognition. She never raised her voice or asked for credit. What she left behind spoke softer than any medal or speech, a reminder that real strength doesn't shout. It simply shows up, holds steady, and does the work when everything else falls apart. Her father used to say, "Purpose weighs more than praise," that precision without meaning is just noise. On that ridge, with 9 shots in 5 minutes, Phoebe hadn't only protected a team, she'd proven that quiet skill, when joined with patience and conviction, can change the course of something far greater than oneself. Her story wasn't just about a soldier. It was about those the world overlooks. The ones others pass by or underestimate. The ones who don't command the room but hold it together when it starts to break. It's easy to judge someone by their rank or patch. Harder to see their worth until the moment matters. Phoebe Hartley taught us to notice the quiet ones, the still ones, the ones who wait for the wind and move only when it's time. They're often the ones who end up saving everything. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit subscribe, drop a comment below, and tell us where you're watching from. This is Major Tom's Tales.